Okay, so on to lecture video 2.3. In this video, we are going to be multiplying fractions and mixed numbers. We're just going to jump right in. I'm going to give you an example, and we are going to talk about the rules. So I have a fraction 2/3. I want you to realize that the dot is replacing your x that you were commonly seeing probably before this class. And so no longer are we going to use the x's because eventually we're going to work into the world where there are x's that represent numbers. And so we don't want to use x's to mean multiply anymore. So this dot means multiply, and our second fraction is 4/5, or 4/5. So I'm multiplying these two. And so I want you to know that we can simplify before we multiply, or we can multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom, and then simplify at the very end. And so the first two examples, I'm just going to multiply straight across and then simplify at the end. And then I'm going to show you a couple of examples where you can simplify in the middle. So for this one, I'm going to multiply straight across the top, and I get 2 times 4 gives me 8. I multiply straight across the bottom, and I get 3 times 5, which gives me 15. And so 8/15, or 8/15, is my final answer, unless I can divide 8 and 15 by the same number. So I know that 1, 2, 4, and 8 go into 8. And I know that 1, 3, 5, and 15 go into 8. So it seems like the only number that they have in common is 1, and if I divide them both by 1, I didn't change anything. So we're not going to simplify this one, and this 8/15 is my final answer. How did I get it? I multiplied straight across the top, and I did 2 times 4 gave me 8, and 3 times 5 gave me 15. Final answer. Okay. For this next problem, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to simplify at the end. And so we're going to do 2/3 times 1/4. That's supposed to be a dot. That got a little crazy. All right, multiplying across the top and across the bottom, simplify at the end. So 2 times 1 is 2, and 3 times 4 is 12. So I have 2/12, or 2/12. I know that I can simplify because I know they're both even numbers, and I know that they both are divisible by 2. Remember, when we simplify, you have to divide the top and the bottom number, or the numerator and denominator, by the same number. That's where you see this blue 2 from. We're dividing 2 into both of them. So 2 goes into 2 one time, and 2 goes into 12 6 times. And so 2/3 times 1/4, after I simplify, gives me a final answer of 1/6. Okay? So hold on to this problem right here. I'm actually going to take it and I'm going to kind of shrink it up just a little bit. And I'm going to show you the same problem worked in just a little bit different of a way. I told you before, I told you before that you can do it like that. You can multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom, and then simplify at the very end. Or you can simplify in the middle. And so I want to show you simplifying in the middle. So I'm going to kind of split this right here. I'm going to write the exact same problem right here, and I'm going to use a highlighter because I need to show you that you can simplify in a couple of different ways. The first way is in the diagonals, and the second way is actually in your fractions. You can simplify on top and bottom. And so with those highlighter marks all over this, I'm going to switch back to a pen and we're going to work this problem. So in one of these yellow diagonals, I have 2 and 4. And I know that I can simplify 2 and 4. They both can be divided by 2. And so 2 goes into 2, and I mark it out because that's gone, and I now have the 1. So I circled the 1 so I know what I have left over. And 2 goes into 4 2 times, and I'm going to mark it out and circle that I have a 2 because that's what's left over. In the other diagonal, I have 3 and 1. Well, they both can be divided by 1, but that's not going to change the value because 3 divided by 1 is still 3, and 1 divided by 1 is still 1. So I'm not going to do anything there, but I am going to look in the green marks that I have, those highlighters, and I'm going to see I have 1/3, and there's no need to simplify those because I have a 1 involved. And the same thing with the other side. I have a 1 and a 2, and so no need to simplify there, but I could if there were numbers there that could simplify. So now I'm ready to go, just like I did up here at this top portion, I'm ready to multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom. But it is very important if you did simplify that you know exactly what numbers you have left over. And so I've circled all of those. So on top I have 1 times 1 is 1, and the denominator I have 3 times 2, which is 6. And so I ended up with a final answer of 1/6. And so I want you to see that these two actually came out to be exactly the same. There are more than one ways, I guess, to simplify or to work these problems. You can multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom, then simplify, or you can simplify and then multiply across the top and on the bottom. So you choose. The next example I'm going to do is going to be one where I'm going to simplify across the top and bottom if I can. And so this problem is 7 times 3/5. All right, so I want you to see something right here. I want you to see that 7 is a whole number, right? It's standing alone. There's nothing with it, so it's a whole number. But I want you to also realize that I wrote it in the numerator. I wrote it a little bit smaller on purpose because I want you to understand that anytime that you have a whole number, it's understood to be over 1 as a fraction, okay? And so this is really the problem that we're working. We're multiplying 7 over 1, or 7, times the 3/5. And so if I can simplify in any of the diagonals, I will. And so 7 and 5 do not simplify, and 1 and 3 do not simplify, and neither of the fractions can simplify that are stacked on top of each other. So we're just going to have to go ahead and solve this problem by multiplying straight across the top and straight across the bottom, and I ended up with 21/5. Now I want you to understand that this is my final answer if the homework asks you to leave it in an improper fraction format. If it says to change it to a mixed number or a proper fraction, this is not an okay answer because this guy is an improper fraction. So there's no way to change an improper fraction to a proper fraction, but I can change an improper fraction to a mixed number. And we remember back from one of our earlier sections that we change this by using our division, right? Remember, we divide our top number divided by our bottom number. Why? Because we read from top to bottom, and this symbol right here means divide. And so I know that 5 goes into 21 4 times. And there's some left over because I have a decimal if I use my calculator. And I'm not going to submit a decimal answer because that's not okay when we're doing a fraction lesson. So we're going to write this out like long division, and I'm going to show you that 4 times is how many times that 5 goes into 20. And so 4 times 5 gives me 20. I subtract and I get a remainder of 1. So this is my whole number. This guy is my numerator, the remainder is my numerator, and then the number that was already my denominator will stay the denominator. So my final answer for this one is 4 1/5 as my final answer. Okay, let's do one more of those problems where we have a whole number involved. The next one is going to be 4 times 3/4. Okay, remember that this is 4. Any whole number is understood to be over 1. And so now I have 4 over 1. Remember earlier I told you that you can simplify in the diagonals if you can, and so in this problem I actually see that I can. Does everybody see this right here? This is my diagonal I'm focusing on, and I see that they're both the same. So I'm going to divide them both by 4 because that's how I'm going to get this to be the simplest number that I can. Well, 4 goes into 4 one time. Remember, I'm circling what I have left over. 4 goes into 4 one time, and I also circle that 1. What do I have left over in the other diagonal? I have a 1 and a 3. And so since I've simplified everything that I can, I'm going to multiply straight across the top and get 3 because 1 times 3 is 3. And on the bottom, I multiply 1 times 1 is 1. Well, 3 over 1, right? So we go back to this guy. Anything over 1 is just a whole number of itself. And so my final answer for this one is going to be 3, right? Because anything over 1 is a whole number of itself. And so that answer is 3. Okay, so it's possible that you will run into some homework that asks you to multiply mixed number times a mixed number. And so let me give you an example of what this looks like. My handwriting is so awful, I apologize. So that is 4 2/3 times 4 1/2. And I want you to realize that before you start multiplying, you need to change these into improper fractions. And you know how to do this from one of our earlier sections, is that backwards C. So we're going to multiply here and add that number up there. We're going to multiply here and add that number. We're going to have 2 separate fractions that we're going to be multiplying together, okay? And so the denominator of this first piece right here was 3, so I'm going to leave 3. The other denominator of the other fraction was 2, and so remember, it will stay the same. So we need to figure out what our numerators are by using that backwards C format. So I have 3 times 4 is 12, and 12 plus this 2 up here gives me 14. On the one on the right, I have 2 times 4 is 8. 8 plus that 1 right up here on the top gives me 9. All right, so now I'm ready to simplify wherever I can. And so I want you to see that in this diagonal, not a plus, a divide. Divide by 3, because 3 goes evenly into both of them. Remember that anytime that you simplify, you must divide both numbers you're simplifying by the same number. So that's why I'm dividing by 3 in both places. So 3 goes into 3 one time, I circle what I have left over. 3 goes into 9 3 times, and I'm going to circle 3 because that's what I have left over. If I focus on the other diagonal, I notice that I have 2 even numbers, and so I'm going to divide both of those even numbers by the same number, which is 2. And so I find here that 2 goes into 2 one time, I circle what I have left over. 2 goes into 14 7 times, and I circle that as well. Multiply straight across the top, and I get 21. Straight across the bottom, and I get 1. Sorry, 21 over 1, because 1 times 1 is how I got my 1. And anything over 1 gives me a final answer of just the numerator. And so 21 is my final answer for this one. Okay, make sure that I've talked about just about everything. I think I have one remaining thing to discuss. And that one is a problem that is a word problem. And those always kind of tend to stump us up. So I'm going to end with a word problem. So this word problem says, find the area of the rectangle with a width of, and I'll leave this blank and actually write them in for you because it's harder for me to type them fractions in, and a length of blank. Okay, so as I switch to my pen here and write these in, we'll be able to solve this. So find an area of the rectangle with a width of 6 1/4 and a length of 5 1/2. These measurements are both feet, okay? And so we have to remember back, how do you find area? Well, a couple of things to think about. Area is length times width, and so that's why the length and width are important, is how we find area, okay? And so when we multiply these, we need to plug in the numbers. And so if I do that, I've got length is 5 1/2 times 6 1/4. Remember that if we do multiplying, we have mixed numbers, we have to change them into the improper fractions by using that C format. And so this denominator's 2, this denominator's 4, because I just brought them down, right? I do the backward C where I multiply and plus, and multiply and I add, and so I get 11 here, I get 25 here. I simplify where I can, and it does not look like I can at all. And so I multiply across the top, and probably should have already worked this out, but I'm going to do it right now. So 11 times 25 is 275, and 2 times 4 is 8. I'm going to see if this will simplify. It does not look like it will evenly, so I'm going to do it long division. And 8 goes into 27 3 times. Let's see. Yes, 3 times. So I'm going to have 24 there. I'm going to subtract. I'm going to bring down a 3. I'm going to bring down the 5. 8 looks like it goes into 35 4 times, which is 32. I'm going to subtract and I get 3. And so remember, this is my whole number. This is my numerator. And this guy was already my denominator, the 8 was, right? And so my final answer for this problem is going to be 34 3/8. Final answer. Remember that this is finding area. The measurements were both feet, so this is going to be feet squared. Okay? It looks like on your homework that it will already have the square feet in the problem for you, so you don't have to worry about typing that in or worrying about the squared or anything like that. So this finishes up our 2.3 homework. You can try on your own problems in Moodle.